Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of the Self-Care Engineer podcast, a podcast that was created to center the lives of Black women and to explore our relationships with self-care and why we deserve self-care as our human right. I am your host, NaKeesa Marie, and I'm thrilled to have you here for the very first episode. The way that this podcast will work is that each episode I'll have a different Black woman join me to talk about their thoughts about self-care, their history with self-care, and why we deserve self-care as Black women. At times, we may also discuss current events, historical events, and data and research related to health and wellness for Black women. The mission of my work with the Self-Care Engineer brand is threefold. First, I want to give Black women a space where we can talk about our humanness, because that very rarely ever happens, where our humanness gets to be discussed and that we are centered for any reason. Second, I want Black women to be able to discuss self-care openly, honestly, and talk about why we very rarely get to experience it on a consistent basis. Finally, these conversations will work together episode after episode, week after week, to bring awareness to the importance of self-care for Black women. My hope is that together we can shift the narrative about what Black women deserve and ultimately replace the narrative that says that our worth is only based on how much labor we put out and what we do for others. Instead, I want to help to create a narrative and ultimately a reality where Black women are supported, celebrated, and expected to invest in our own care. A reality where our families, our workplaces, our communities, and our society as a whole understand that we deserve rest and care just because we exist. I've been planning and working on this podcast for a very long time, and I can't tell you how excited I am that you are here to join in the conversation with us. But before we jump into today's conversation, I thought that it would be appropriate for me to introduce myself properly. So I decided that I will be my own first guest. Future episodes will have a different guest every week. They will be Black women from all different walks of life. But first, I think it's only fair that I share mine. So once again, my name is NaKeesa Marie. I am a writer, a creative. Some call me a self-care strategist, and I'm the self-care engineer. I'm also a very, very staunch self-care advocate, particularly for Black women. And I've been practicing self-care in one way or another for a very long time, since I was around 15 years old. Back when I was 15, I didn't have all the language that I have now around why self-care is important. I simply knew that I needed ways to take care of myself, protect my peace, and create a life that felt sustainable and fulfilling and happy for me. And over the years, my practice evolved. It started with small acts of caring for myself, and then it became my philosophy, and now it is the basis of the work I do with and for other Black women, including myself. One of the reasons that I started using the title, The Self-Care Engineer, is because my work involves more than simply encouraging people to engage in self-care. I believe that self-care needs to be intentionally engineered. A self-care practice can be built. It should be tested and adjusted, and always maintained. Just like an engineer builds a system that is meant to function well over time, I believe that we should build self-care practices for our individual lives that will sustain us for the long term, for our entire lives. And again, I am prioritizing Black women because I believe that Black women deserve more than just survival. We need care, rest, joy, and peace, and we need this to sustain us for our entire lives. So I hope you're ready to hear me answer about 10 questions that I plan on asking every guest, so that you can get like an inside look into my philosophy, my self-care practice, and why it is just so important to me to assist other Black women in doing the same. Okay, So let's get started. I have my notes so that I won't lose track of the questions that I want to ask myself and answer. All right, so question number one. When did you begin intentionally developing a self-care practice, and what was happening in your life at the time? Okay, so I shared with you all that I decided when I was about 15 that I was going to develop this self-care or care practice for myself. I didn't call it self-care back then. I had not heard that term back then, even though recently I learned that that term, I guess, was coined in the 60s or 70s. I have to quote that research. So let me find that out and let you know maybe in the next episode. However, I didn't use the term self-care. I just knew that what I was seeing other Black women kind of go through in their day-to-day lives looked very similar to one another. The women in my household, to a certain extent, my community, my church, just in the world, when I would see other Black women's day-to-day lives, they mostly, unless they were wealthy, which most people I knew were not, they just seemed not happy. They seemed totally put upon by everybody in their lives. And they seemed to just not be able to ever get a break. And I'm thinking at 15, like, for so long I wanted to become an adult. Like all little kids always say, like, oh, I can't wait till I grow up. I'm gonna do this, that, and the other. But it looked like to me, I was gonna grow up to only have a life of complete and total self-sacrifice and servitude to other people. And I didn't want that. So I said, I'm going to make sure that my husband, my kids, whoever, my friends, they understand that I'm going to always make sure that I am getting the things that I want in my life, happiness, and that I'm always going to be a priority in my own life. Like, why would I give that up? That didn't make any sense to me. I did not feel that I was born just to grow up and be in service completely to other people and not care at all about how I felt or have consistent happiness and fulfillment, even and rest in my life. I said, no thanks. Okay, question two. How has your understanding of self-care evolved from the 15-year-old version of yourself to the woman you are today? Well, like I was mentioning in the intro, I started with small things. I didn't really know what it would look like. I didn't have it like fully fleshed out. So I would just do things like, hey, I'm going to sleep in. I'm going to take naps. I'm going to think about if our family is doing something, we got to make sure that NaKeesa is able to do some of the things that she wants to do too. I mean, I feel like my parents did a pretty good job, and my maternal grandmother lived with us too to make sure that I was considered, but I wanted to practice making sure that I was considered. And I wanted to do that in a very intentional way. So that's kind of how it looked at 15. And then as time moved on, I learned more about myself. I evolved. I grew. I became an official legal adult person. I moved out of my parents' home and had my own home and family. And so depending on what was going on in my life at the time, that's what I gave myself as far as self-care goes. So, like in my early 20s, still doing things like, sleeping in, getting naps, things like that. I started taking myself to the spa, getting massages, going on walks by the water, going on day trips, those kinds of things. That was kind of how my self-care looked when I was, in my early adulthood years. And then I had, in my 30s, a very serious medical crisis that was almost completely disastrous for me, is how I will describe it. And that particular incident made me realize that I needed to take some things off of my calendar. And I wasn't thinking that I was not engaging in self-care because I had so much on my plate. But after that experience, I said, if I survive, I am going to live my life differently. And I want to make it very clear, I had a happy life before that. I did a lot of things that I wanted. I was considered in my household by my partner and myself, but I had too much on my plate. So in my mid 30s, I took 75% of the things that were on my plate off because I was being stretched too thin, and no one was making that happen to me more than I was making it happen to myself. And there were reasons why, right? I was programmed and I was programmed to have a lot on my plate, to be a go-getter, to be a person that accomplished a lot. And so in order to do that, I tried to stretch those 24 hours a day that we had to the ultimate capacity that I could. I wasn't getting enough sleep. I was sleeping maybe 5 to 6 hours a night. I was staying up as long as I could so that I could have as many hours as possible to get things done, to accomplish things. So I really had to think about why that was so important to me, and really have an honest conversation with myself that I was the person that was putting most of those things on my plate that weren't required. And what was it going to mean if I took it off of my plate? So that was another thing that, changed for me around that age. And from then to now, it's been some years, and I have gone through other iterations of what my self-care practice looks like. I still go on day trips. I still walk by the water. I still take naps. I still sleep in sometimes. But, working out, even though that's maintenance and it's for my physical health, that's something that brings me a lot of joy, and it makes me feel in balance, not imbalanced. And so I do that on a regular basis. I fortify myself with nutrient dense foods. When I was younger, I was not doing that. I was eating junk. I was eating junk food a lot, and I wasn't thinking about the nutritional value of things as I should have, not as much as I should have. So doing that is another way that I invest in my self-care. I also make sure that I keep in front of me, keep before me my humanness. Like, you're human. You deserve care. You deserve nice things. And that nice thing could just be something that doesn't cost money, like making sure that my home is peaceful, making sure there's not like a lot of rigmarole going on a daily basis. I also believe in ease. I used to do a lot of things. Like I said, I had a lot of things on my plate, but now I try to think about how can I do that, where that thing, or, accomplish a certain goal or something, not like cheating or being unethical or anything like that, but how can I do it in a way that honors peace and softness and ease for me? Because sometimes we do things the hard way and it's not really necessary. It might just be the only way that we know how to do things, or have been taught to do things, or used to do things. And I decided, you know what? I'm not going to do things that way. I am going to do things on the path of ease. That's more of a recent way that I have invested in my self-care. And I hope that answers the question about what it looked like when I was 15 to what it looks like now. It really is a way of life. I don't have to think about it anymore. It is integrated into my life. And so that is not to mean that I don't make changes when it's necessary, because I do make those adjustments when it's necessary, because I will sit down and think about, do a self-care inventory and think about, am I getting what I need? Does it need to change right now? Or life just might change and it'll just let me know, okay, can't do that in that way right now. Or that's no longer serving me. Let me adjust the way that I am showing up in my self-care part of my life, so that it really does give me what I need in this very moment, or at this very time in my life. Oh, my papers almost fell. But I'm going to leave that in because that is real life. Okay, question 3. What experiences have had the greatest impact on the way you approach self-care now? I would say that understanding that self-care really is a mindset, that whatever particular thing I need is second to me understanding that I deserve it, me understanding that regardless of whether other people think I deserve it, whether they respect that I'm going to give it to myself or not, I'm going to give it to myself. So I think just knowing that that is what is the most important thing that I keep before me, that how I see, or I'm sorry, my mindset about self-care, that stays intact, because everything else will fall into place, whether I need to make adjustments, whether I need to make changes, whether something else or something doesn't serve me anymore and I need to replace it, that knowing that I deserve self-care is the thing that's had the greatest impact on, why and how I approach self-care in my life. Okay, question 4. Why do you believe so many Black women struggle to prioritize their own care? It always makes me a little sad when I have to say this. This is my opinion. This is what I've observed, and on some level even experienced, even though I'm a person that's been practicing self-care for a long time. I believe that most Black women who are finding it hard or struggle to engage in self-care, that is the case because we have been programmed to not do it. That's number one. We often don't have a lot of role models or mentors or people around us that we can look at who's engaging in it on a regular basis or that encourages us. In fact, we get a lot of discouragement to engage in self-care. Of course, we are told that is selfish. We are told that even if we don't say it's self-care that we want to do, but if we want to do something for ourselves that is reasonable and is within reason, and people in our families, in our neighborhoods, in our communities tell us that something other than that, like opposite to the fact that we want to do this very reasonable thing for ourselves, then that continues to feed that narrative that we shouldn't be doing that, that we're a bad mother, a bad partner, a bad friend, a bad daughter, a bad niece, a bad person. If you are a Black woman and you're not being totally self-sacrificing or 90% self-sacrificing, then you are not fulfilling your role as a good Black woman. So that is perpetuated and, over and over again. And I always like to say that I don't like it, but I always do say that Black women are not the only ones who were programmed in this way. Everybody else was socialized and programmed along with us. So even if we want to break free from that narrative or the norm, it's going to be an uphill battle. We're going to have to fight against sometimes our whole community, sometimes our whole family. And we have to know within ourselves that I deserve this. I deserve to be on my own priority list too, and that can be hard. It can be very draining. It can be demoralizing. And sometimes it can feel like it's just easier to go along with the status quo in the program, because fighting against everyone just to have peace, just to be able to give myself more than just going to get my hair done and nails done is like not worth it. So I think all those reasons are reasons why Black women often find it very, very difficult to engage in self-care. Okay, question 5. What does self-care mean to you today, and how is it different from the way that it is often portrayed in popular culture? Well, I think I answered what it means to me today. Like, I can't say it enough. First and foremost, I know that I deserve it. So the fact that I know that I deserve it does not make it hard for me to prioritize that in my life every single day. In fact, I start my day with doing something for myself. So usually that's meditating. The second thing I do, if I haven't already planned it out or it's not like already on my schedule or already like, able to be easily fit in, I will sit down after I meditate and take a few more minutes to think about how am I going to incorporate self-care and what things am I going to do or not do to incorporate self-care into my life each day. And I really do feel like the things that I call self care, some of them are the same as we see in popular culture. I mentioned getting massages, I mentioned going to the spa. Sometimes I have been known to light a candle or two. I take bubble baths sometimes. I do a lot of, or some of the things that we see the aesthetics of self care portrayed on social media, for instance, or in fictitious, movies and films. But I also call other things self-care that I don't think that people think about as self-care. So again, the way I live my life day in and day out, that is self-care to me. Feeding myself nutritious foods, having a peaceful home. I mean, that right there should be like number one on everybody's list in my mind. Making sure that I was talking about ease earlier. So, ease in my life, not, being a martyr, not putting myself through the fire unnecessarily. I know that we are put through the fire as Black women a lot. Um, and it's not something that we choose, but when we can choose it, when I can choose it, I'm not going to do things in the hard way. I also don't let a lot of people have access to me. I think that, my social media presence, the interviews that I do and things like that would make people think that I allow a lot of people to have access to me. I don't. I am very, very selective when it comes to that. I'm selective about who can be in my space, who can even be in my car, not to mention my home, who can even contact me by phone, email. I am just very cautious about who can have access to me. And if someone shows me that they don't mean me any good or mean me harm or whatever, or they are not treating me with kindness, it doesn't matter to me who they are. They could be a blood relative. They could be someone I'm in love with. They can be someone that I have a platonic love for, a deep platonic love, a long-term friendship, for instance. If they purposely try to harm me in some way, they gotta go. I don't even give it a second thought at this point because my peace is far too important. And I'm not going to sacrifice that for any reason. And I don't say that everybody has to do that, but it works for me. And those are some of the kinds of things that I call self-care that maybe other people may not think of as self-care or want to do as self-care, but those are the things that work very well for me. Okay, question number 6. Why did you decide to embrace the title Self Care Engineer, and what does that title represent to you? So, I talked about it in the opening, that I believe that an engineer, they build things and systems to work and withstand, over and over again for a really, really long time. But I think the part about that was really meaningful to me, and why I decided engineer would be what I wanted to be part of, like my title and my brand, is because I really have intentionally built this self-care practice for myself, and I've helped other women and other people in general build self-care practices for themselves as well. I also do workshops, I have community conversations, I host a book club around self-care, and I have books and other resources where people can use them to help them build their own self-care practices. So I really do believe in the building part of what engineers do, as far as, how, whether they're like getting in there and using their hands specifically to do, to build something, they are building the plans for how something is going to work. And that is very much what I've done again for myself and helped other people do that as well. So that's where the self-care engineer title came for me. Okay, question 7. What have you learned from helping other people develop self-care practices through your books, workshops, consultations, and community spaces? I do not mean this answer in any kind of negative way at all, or sarcastic, I guess I should say. But I really have learned that if I could clone myself into, I don't know, at least 1,000 of me, I think that that would still be insufficient for the amount of people that I think I need to reach to support them in helping to build their own self-care practices, or encourage them, or, check on them and model for them that self-care is so important. Because even though I focused on Black women, I have done workshops for teens. I have a book for kids, who are younger than teenage years. I work with women and men and non-binary people from all different communities, so not just Black women. And really, a lot of the things that I hear about why people are not engaging in self-care is the same. Um, and it is, I hear those things very frequently. So I learned that there is a lot to be done. A lot more than I'll be able to do as one person and in my, my lifetime, and the people that I'll be able to actually reach. I also learned that people see self-care in different ways. So people who don't need necessarily like the help in the same way that other people do to build their self-care practice. Um, I am learning what maybe I thought was self-care or what works for me looks different for other people. I have people in my book clubs who are in different parts of the country, for instance. And, I have some people who are part of a book club that starts at 7 p.m. on the West Coast where I am, and they are in a whole nother time zone, and it's super late where they are. But for them, they love it. Like, they feel like this is something that I'm giving myself on a Sunday night. And I like to believe that after they're done, after we close out the book club, because it's virtual, that they are going to bed and they are, having that as, I guess, one of their last experiences for Sunday. And then they're waking up on Monday morning. At least I know I am waking up on Monday morning with that, having been the thing that they did before they, went to sleep for the evening. I also learned a lot about myself in my work with other people, that I too needed a community. I was doing this a lot, to a large degree on my own. And I was continuously having to fight the narratives and people telling me I was selfish and people telling me all kinds of things, that I, was not valued. I wasn't a good Black woman because I wasn't completely, totally self-sacrificing, even though I have done, I mean, and you can Google this, so many things to support my community and others for that matter. But it doesn't matter because I'm not spending all of my time doing that. And I think how I think about myself, that's a problem for other people. The fact that I know that I deserve that is a problem for other people. But I learned that though I was able to deal with that, and I was strong enough to fight against it solo, is so much better and easier and affirming to do that with a community of other Black women in particular, and then my larger community that is supporting me, who's also giving me support. So I learned that about self-care as well in my work with other people. Question 8. Why is it important to you that Black women engage in self-care not only individually, but also in community with one another? Well, I think I alluded to that with the answer to question 7, and that is because I do, obviously, self care is about the self, right? But I don't think we are meant to do most things in life alone. I think that there's some things we need to do alone. In fact, I watched this documentary one time where this very famous songwriter said that their songwriting process is that they have this cabin in like an isolated woodsy area that is nowhere near where they live, and they will go there for a month, 2 or 3. Like, they leave their family, their partner and their children, and they go to this cabin so that they can have complete and utter focus on songwriting, that they don't get disturbed, that they don't have to I guess wake up with an alarm clock. If they want to write throughout the night, they can do that and sleep during the day or the afternoon or whatever. And I remember feeling some type of way about that, like thinking about my partner leaving me with 3 kids. To go off somewhere for 3 months. But when I took kind of myself out of it, I did realize, that, yeah, a lot of things we have to do, or some things I should say that we do need to be done solo. So some of our self-care practice are things that we do by ourselves, maybe reading, for instance, or sometimes going on a walk. I like to go on walks with people and alone. So I can do that particular thing in both ways. However, I don't believe that we're supposed to do life alone. And I don't believe that we are supposed to do most things in isolation. I think that it makes it much more rich. It's enriching, actually, to engage in community care, self-care, that's supported by community together. Like I was saying in the answer to question 7, the last question, I've learned so much about other people's perspective. I feel poured into, just having that moral support. And we get moral support with a lot of things. Like if we're on, in any organized sports, like we're on a team, like the team, like, pours into each other. We got this team, go team, all of that. And so I think that we have so many other parts of our lives where we're encouraged to do things, whether we're on a team, whether it's something academic, whatever. And we should be encouraged and get that moral support when it comes to self-care as well. Okay, question 9. If a Black woman listening feels overwhelmed and doesn't know where to begin, what would you want her to know? I will want her to know that there's almost no situation, life circumstance, where self-care cannot be integrated into your life. It may not look like someone else's. It may not be able to be something that is happening a lot for you, but even small changes can make a huge difference. And I think that we see examples of this kind of thing, that philosophy, that practice in other ways in life. For instance, we might see a commercial or a television show or a movie or whatever. We might read an article where it says, if you just increase your water intake by blah, 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 these specific scientifically backed things will happen in your body, in your system, for instance. And that's not medical advice, just FYI. But that was just an example. And so if we can make small changes that can improve our lives in, other ways, then even incorporating something small or something that might seem small to you into your life, that is in the self-care arena and realm, it could make a huge difference. And even if not huge, I believe it'll be noticeable, because I've experienced that myself, and I've had so many people tell me the same thing, especially Black women. I also would say not to be self-serving at all, but because I have built this community and it continues to grow, that if you are on social media, follow me on social media, because I post things every day that gets at the thought process. And, there are sometimes tips that other people will comment and say, hey, I do this, I do that, I've done this, I've done that. So that community can often give us ideas of ways that we can, put those things or try some of those things and pour into ourselves a little bit. Also, I have things in my newsletter that Black women can follow if they go to my website, NaKeesaMarie.com. And I didn't mention my at NaKeesa Marie on Instagram, Facebook, and Threads is where you can find me, at NaKeesa Marie all together, so that you can kind of follow along with the daily posts here, the experiences that I have, the things that I've seen, the things that I've learned, and what other people in the community are saying. And then, of course, if you're able to, join one of the book clubs, because that definitely is one of the spaces where there is, it's virtual, but it's like alive, it's humans interacting together around self-care. And that you will know, regardless of what you choose to do, if you choose to do one of those things, social media, newsletter, join one of the book clubs, you're not alone. And you will be able to take what is shared and hopefully think about how to incorporate those things in your life. Okay, final question, question 10. What is your hope for this podcast, and what do you hope Black women will gain from listening to these conversations? I think that exactly what I just said for the answer to question 9 is that they won't feel alone. They will feel seen. They will feel centered. They will feel prioritized, because this space was created for Black women, period. And so, though other people who have other identities for sure can gain some knowledge, maybe some encouragement from this space is going to be for you, for Black women. And you're just going to be centered. We're going to talk about, like I said, maybe historical facts, data, research. We're going to hear stories from Black women from all walks of life who have so many different experiences. And I believe that there will be women who all the other women, Black women listening, will be able to relate to. So I hope that they will just feel loved, centered, appreciated, and prioritized, and feel poured into in a way by watching this podcast, listening to this podcast. I hope that the podcast grows. I have about 13 women right now, Black women, who have gotten back to me from showing an initial interest in being on the podcast. And it took me a few months to get everything together. So I am going to, ask for, I'm going to put out a larger call for even more Black women to be on the podcast. I'm going to do about one per month. That's what I'm committing to for the rest of this year. But then in 2027, I want to have a different guest every week, maybe more frequently than that. So I just hope that Black women will, again, feel seen and really, really feel and know that this space is for them. Well, thank you for spending your time with me, for watching the first episode of the Self-Care Engineer podcast. So my plans after today is that I will be having my first guest that's not me in a couple weeks. And I again look forward to this journey of hearing all of the stories, experiences that other Black women are having and their thoughts about self-care. And I hope that listeners will feel encouraged. And if you are not a Black woman, that if you are in a Black woman's life, you will do what you can to remove barriers for her to be able to engage in self-care, because we have to all do this together in order to push back on the narrative and then ultimately change the narrative, and then ultimately change our society so that it functions in a way that Black women are able to engage in self-care very easily, very much. It is a regular part of our lives. But until then, I want everyone listening, in particular Black women, to remember that you deserve self-care simply because you exist. Thank you.